Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast. We have a ton of stuff to talk about this week, and also at the end I have an interview with the former Sony BVM technician who really just gives a great insight into how these things work and some great tips, so stay tuned for that, but let's jump right into the news. So I wanted to start with an update on that component to SCART pass-through adapter. I'll skip to the end and then kind of go back and explain why we're at where we're at now. But anybody that wants one, retrofixes.com is going to be taking care of all the pre-orders, and then we'll be selling at least a few of them after the pre-orders have been fulfilled. I have a link in the description of where to go to buy it directly, and anybody who has emailed me about pre-orders, probably by the time you're watching this, you would have already gotten an email from me explaining, all the other little details. But RetroFixes is willing to do $20 as a pre-order, and then after the pre-orders are done and he has stock of them, he'll sell them for $25 each. So why we came to this point is kind of an interesting and kind of shitty of a story at the same time. So I figured if you wanted to pre-order one, I wanted to get that info out right away. But here's kind of the story behind it. So when I first mentioned doing this group buy pre-order for these SCART adapters, I figured one or two people might be interested, and it turned out a lot of people were, which is awesome. That's great. That just means we figured out a way to solve a problem that a bunch of people were having. So totally cool. It just also means that I'm going to have to do it a little bit different because I live in a tiny little apartment now, and access to a car isn't like, in the city isn't the same, so it's not like I could take big bundles of boxes back and forth from the post office. So I enlisted some help. I first contacted, obviously, the company that sells them, and they said they cannot sell them outside of Australia. There's no bulk discounts because the manufacturer doesn't make them anymore. It is what it is. And they can't even accept payment from somebody with an address outside of Australia. And it's all due to some rules that it probably makes no difference why. It's just the way it is. So I contacted a store. And I don't want to say their name because they have done a lot of good for the retro gaming community and they sell some cool stuff. So I'm just going to say a store, a web store. And I kind of told them about, hey, it's a pass-through adapter. It's something that a lot of people have already wanted to buy. You'll probably get a few returns because even though I've said it a million times, it's just a pass-through adapter, not a converter. But some people just aren't going to get it until they bring it home. And they seemed really interested. They said, oh, yeah, great. We're actually really looking to get into a lot of these component parts. And, we're looking forward to adding this stuff to our store. And I kind of gave them a list of what to do and, made sure, hey, we have people that could help. Just let me know. We could set up, forwarding addresses, whatever you need. I guess they didn't listen to any of that. Contacted the company directly and then got back to me and said, yeah, it's too much effort. We're not going to do it. And I didn't really know how to respond to that. So it's not really how you would want to talk to somebody who, after you just said you want to get into selling stuff to the retro gaming community, more parts and stuff. So I responded with, whatever, I'll do it myself. And they responded back a couple of minutes later, yeah, well, look, after the price of these things, we'd have to sell them for like $40 anyway. Now I'm pissed. So obviously, if you've never sold anything online, any kind of retail like scenario, you might not grasp that if you buy something for $10 and you sell it for $15, you're probably losing money at the end of the day between shipping and taxes and, not even counting in your time, really. There's just so many things going into it. Even selling on eBay. A couple weeks ago, I made a comment like how much money you would lose selling through eBay, and somebody posted in the comments, oh, what are you talking about? The eBay sales calculator's right here. Always hidden fees. Always. Everywhere you look. You buy a shipping label for $8, or you charge $8 for shipping, turns out to be 10. Little things that add up. So the fact that they need to make a large profit on something is totally fine, and we as a community that buys weird shit should be fine with that, because a lot of people aren't stepping up to the plate. But once I heard gonna sell them for about $40, that's ridiculous. That's insane, and that's borderline ripping people off. So I emailed Wes from RetroFixes, and I told him what happened, and I said, will you just do me a favor and do this? I don't know, you might have to deal with a lot more trouble than it's worth, but, would you take one for the team? And he said, absolutely no problem. He was willing to do a cheaper price for people that wanted to do the pre-order, And then in talking to the company in Australia, we might actually buy the entire stock they have left, just so we could have some. They don't have much. I think it's just over 50, which is close to what the pre-orders that people showed interest in was. So, cool. This might work out for all of us. And then solving the problem of actually getting the parts from the company to RetroFixes. Somebody named Cameron emailed me and is actually willing to go down and pick them up for us. So, holy shit, what an awesome ending to a kind of a weird and fucked up story. Sorry for all the swears in this right off the bat, but, I mean, so that's, two people completely stepped up to the plate to help. And after two other people, me and the store, failed miserably. I failed because I couldn't do it myself because I don't have the room. The store failed because I guess they wanted to rip people off. And Cameron stepped up and said, nope, I'll go and pick these things up and ship them right to you. And Wes said, no problem, I'll take care of all the distribution and just do it for anybody that wants it. So, kind of a great ending to a weird story. I'm sorry for rambling right off the bat. I promise the rest of this week's roundup will be a lot more straightforward, but I just wanted to give everybody the full background, because both to answer why they're going to be $20 and not cheaper, why it's taking so long to get the pre-orders out, and pretty much just, having the good ending of two people just totally offer to chip in and help and kind of make it better for everybody like me that needs one of these things. So thank you to both of these guys very much, and to everybody that already sent me your email pre-ordering. You should have an email by now from me. So I'm sorry that you have to now go buy it from a different place, but it should be pretty straightforward, and you should get them by the end of the month, provided shipping isn't too crazy. So cool, and thanks to everybody that's helping with this. Okay, on a much lighter note, the Wii Homebrew channel is now open source. The team behind it, after working on it for I think almost 10 years now, has decided to actually release the full source code to the public. And this is great. This is just another example of a great team of people that had an awesome software, now just kind of releasing it for everybody to use so it just doesn't get lost in history. So thanks to those guys for making a really, really awesome piece of software, and now for releasing it to everybody else that needs to use something like that. Next, Ben Heck just uploaded a video on how he tried to reverse engineer the Game Boy printer. So if you're a fan of his videos and like seeing old technology pulled apart and kind of reverse engineered, you'd definitely enjoy this one, just like his other videos. The creator of the Ultra HDMI mod for the N64 just added two new products to his website. The first is the Ultra Save, which is a device for $20 that allows you to plug in your N64 cartridge and save the save game to your computer for use either in emulators, ROM carts, or just to back up your save game. And for that price, I think that's pretty awesome, because I'm sure many of us have old cartridges with our original save games on them from when we were kids. The other thing is he updated the N64 drive. So the 64 drive is a ROM cart kind of like an EverDrive, just made by him. And I believe this supports compact flash as well as SD. And it has a Wi-Fi module built in. It's got a bunch of cool updates to it. And this is going to be about $200. To be honest, I emailed Marshall about all this because I wasn't sure how new they were, if it all came out this week, or if I had just missed it in their old products. But Marshall hasn't responded to an email in about almost a year, I think. So if anybody knows him, and anybody can get an update, just definitely let me know and I'll post it. Whether it's an email that I'll read or anything. I just, I guess he's still kicking and he's still making products, but he's kind of hard to get a hold of, and I certainly want to help promote all the stuff he's working on, but it's kind of hard to do so if you have no correspondence with him whatsoever. So if anybody knows him, just let him know, like, hey, it might be a good idea to just post an update on your website or Facebook or something and let people know what you're up to. Next, Darksoft just posted a video of his NeoGeo ROM cart's menu in action. So the menu's almost finished, and there's still no word on when the ROM cart itself will be available, but as soon as there's any solid news, I'll definitely keep everybody updated. Last week I talked about the Kickstarter for the Genesis game Tanglewood, and the developer of that project has now posted a video that shows his original Genesis development kit. So even if you don't plan on backing that Kickstarter or you don't really care about the game, I actually thought the video was really cool, and I really enjoyed kind of seeing the development tools that people were using back in the 90s, and I guess in the late 80s too, to make these games. So if you're interested, definitely check it out. Next, the Ninja Gaiden soundtrack is getting a full remaster. Both the NES and arcade versions will be released on CD, vinyl, and digitally. If you submit your address, I guess you'll get notified whenever pre-orders are open. And obviously, anytime you mix music and gaming, two of my favorite things, I'm totally on board for stuff like this. I'm just really curious, though. Is it Ninja Gaiden or Ninja Gaiden?
Ninja Gaiden. Ninja Gaiden. Normally they say Ninja Gaiden.
The unreleased Jaguar game Fiorello Fighters just had a demo ROM released on the internet. So both the ROM release and the game itself both had interesting stories behind them. So I guess Nicholas Persians, the guy who does all the really awesome rotary mods for the Atari Jaguar, it's the same mod that I actually reviewed on my site. He bought the ROM of the demo and released it to everybody because he wanted to share it with the community. So another awesome contribution to the community by him. And I guess the game itself was kind of interesting because it was, a blatant Mortal Kombat ripoff. And some of the actors were some of the original actors for Mortal Kombat, including Daniel Pesina, who I actually just met a few weeks ago at the Retro World Expo, which was awesome. So it's pretty neat, and this is something I'm definitely going to try as soon as that new Jaguar ROM cart is released. And it's kind of cool that we're still getting unreleased games from that era, and I hope the full game is eventually released. The game wasn't completed, so I think the demo might be all that's left of it. It's still worth trying, though, and definitely check out the page in the video if you're interested. Nintendo just put a bunch of 3DS and Wii U games on sale, and that sale is going to last till December 5th. It's not one of those quick one-day, Cyber Monday or Black Friday sales, so I figured I would post the link for anybody interested. A remastered version of the game Wonderboy is available on Steam. I guess it was released about a month ago, but they just had a big update that patched a few bugs, and now it's also 40% off. So any fans of that game, definitely check it out. Me personally, I'm on a PC 10 plus hours a day for all the different work that I do, so I try not to PC game at all. It's just too easy for me to get distracted and start answering emails and stuff. So I always prefer console or handheld gaming, but obviously PC gaming is massive, so if you're into Steam and these things, definitely check it out. Smokemonster has just added a mirror of his ROM sets to a different file hosting site. I guess certain international users weren't able to access it through the original one. So now if you Google Smokemonster ROM sets, it'll still bring you to that same forum page, but now there'll be multiple places for you to download it. So this should really take care of everybody on the planet who needs these things. And once again, I'm just a huge fan of them because it's everything I want all in the same place. So thanks to him for making these, and I'm really glad now there's two places to get them. Someone just created 3 brand new levels for the Sega Master System version of Sonic 2. I guess it was part of a coding competition, and there's 3, completely new levels based off of the Sonic 2 SMS game. So anybody who's into that stuff, definitely follow the link, because it looks really great. A new version of the 64 Doom Rom Toolkit was just released, which I believe is a piece of software that allows you to port the Doom PC games to the N64, because Doom 64 wasn't the same as Doom 1. I've actually played an old version of this, and it worked pretty well, but supposedly there's lots of good improvements that have happened since then. So if anybody has any experience with this toolkit or the other things you can do with it, please post in the comments. I'd love to hear how far you can go with stuff like this. I hear you could even port different versions of the game into, so it's definitely on my list of things to try out whenever I get around to it. Next, Extrems has just updated the Game Boy interface software with a few bug fixes and optimizations. Now, the Game Boy interface software is what you would use with a GameCube and the Game Boy Player, just instead of the Game Boy Player's boot disk. This software will allow that to run much better, and in my opinion, this is, at the moment, the best way to play Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games on a TV. He also released the source code for the Game Boy Advance as GameCube controller. So that's another awesome thing too. So anybody that needs to use that code in their software will be able to now implement that, so you could use a Game Boy Advance as a controller. So thanks again to Extrems, and awesome work as always. Someone on the NES Dev forum just announced they started work on an FPGA-based Super Nintendo. So I think stuff like this is incredible, and with products like the AVS, you could see how far FPGAs can go, because that is in my opinion, a really accurate way to play Nintendo games. And it's fairly cheap too, all things considered. So hopefully this SNES project will continue to progress, and hopefully we'll all have prototypes soon to test out and give our opinions on. But there's no solid news on release dates or pre-orders or anything even remotely close to that. But as always, I'll keep everybody posted. And because the SNES is my favorite system, you bet anytime there's any news at all, I'll be talking about it. So good luck to the person doing the development, and I'm really excited about this one. Now on to the Q&A stuff. The first is a question about my interview with Johan from Arcade Forge. So I guess Arcade Forge doesn't sell the Scanline Generator for component video anymore. They only sell the VGA-based one. And I had forgotten to even mention that in the interview. So I actually reached out to Johan about it and asked him, and he said he experienced issues on certain monitors that would result in flickering. It was a very few percentage of the items sold, so he will still build them, but only on request. But a good alternative to that is just using the current Scanline Generator 3000, the SLG 3000, and using a passive adapter to route component video through it. The only thing is you would need an external power adapter, because the SLG 3000 runs off the 5V VGA pin, and if you're doing a component to VGA dongle, then obviously there's no voltage. But if you actually look at the SLG 3000, on the side is a 5V and ground terminal block, just like with his sync stripper. So it seems like a really great workaround for anybody that just wants to add scan lines to 480p component. Next is another question based on the arcade stuff that we talked about last week. And Sammy SNES wanted to know if he could use that product, the Pide 2 JAMA, and hook it up to a Sony PVM. While I think technically you could do that, you could probably use some adapters, it's not the easiest way to do it. And in fact, I would recommend either waiting until they release their SCART version of it, which, if they go through with it, will have a SCART output and even a serial input, so you could go all analog on a Raspberry Pi. That would be pretty cool. I hope that's not too far away. But for the short term, you might want to just buy a Raspberry Pi 3 and a VGA adapter for it. It's called the GERT666 VGA adapter. I know that name doesn't make any sense to me, but basically you're able to use one of those to get direct analog output, and you would need to use either a sync combiner circuit or run it through an Extron RXI device in order to do RGB HV to RGBS. But right now I've been playing with it, and I got it to work. It's just pretty complicated. So what I'm really hoping to do is find somebody willing to make like a recall box or a RetroPie image that automatically outputs in 240p analog right through a VGA adapter like this. I don't think I'm good enough at it to be able to pull that off, but if anybody watching is, please, email me or post in the comments, because it would make everybody's life so much easier if we could just buy a RetroPie, buy a Raspberry Pi, get a VGA adapter, and then just load your version of the software on here that's pre-configured for 240p analog, because there's just a lot of tweaking involved. You have to load it on a Linux or a Mac in order to get to some of the partitions, and it's a gigantic pain. And also, for anybody that wants to buy the GERT VGA adapter, it worked well, but you have to assemble it. I guess it's for export reasons or something, and it's certainly not hard to assemble, but if you were expecting something that you could just get in the mail and plug in, you actually have to solder all those through-hole resistors and all of the individual pins right to it. So it's a good solution, it's just all of it's a bit convoluted still. So hoping that Arcade Forge just sells a SCART kit for it soon, because it'll just be plug and play. But until then, I would suggest just doing it yourself. And you could always, when you're done, just pull off the VGA adapter and upgrade to the new one when it comes out. So at least you're not wasting your money or anything. Next, I had a few questions in regards to that mod where you could put a Game Boy Advance backlit screen into a Game Boy Color. And to answer the questions that I got, I guess people were wondering why you would even want to do that, since a Game Boy Advance can play Game Boy and Game Boy Color games. And in my opinion, some people just like the feel of that style handheld. It is cool. I mean, a lot of people just like to mod stuff because it's fun to mod stuff. But I do understand that having that, hold on from the bottom feel is important to some people because that's how they prefer to play. I actually find it more comfortable to play on those older ones as well, but I don't know if I would consider gutting a AGS 101 for the screen just for that reason. And somebody else asked, or pointed out, there are AGS 101 screens on Alibaba. Not all of them are real. A lot of them are just third-party copies, and I've gotten one of those before, and it is bad. It was somebody who had put it in a standard original Game Boy Advance, the ones with the buttons on the side, and when I got it, I mean, I didn't even need to do a side-by-side comparison. I turned it on and was just walking around with Link in one of the Zelda games and noticed immediately. So if anybody knows a link to real AGS 101 screens, maybe new old stock or something like that, please post in the comments. But the ones that I had seen personally were pretty bad, so I certainly wouldn't recommend one of those for this project. Lastly, Corpse413 had a question about RGB Scart cables. So I guess he bought a bunch of them a few years ago, and one of them was giving him trouble with the OSSC, and he wanted to know if he should open it up and mess with it to try to repair it himself. And in my opinion, opening up the SCART end, totally easy. Just open it up, do any mods that you need to it, but anything that's in the console end, I don't think it's a good idea to open it up. A lot of the cable manufacturers sealed them with epoxy or glue. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but anyway, even if they didn't, it's hard to get the components open, or the actual connector open. So I would leave it alone if you needed to mess with something in the console end. And RGB SCART cables are such a pain, and the way that a lot of these companies did them, the actual console manufacturers, was pretty weird. And I actually talked with Voltar about this a few weeks ago on the podcast, and I talk with him on Skype about it on a regular basis. And I guess two examples I can give, and I'll try to make it as quick as possible, is like the Super Nintendo. Generally speaking, it was pretty easy to make an RGB SCART cable for it, but the NTSC cable required capacitors in the SCART head, and the PAL cable required resistors to match the PAL standards. Well, if the motherboard revisions were different for NTSC and PAL, why wouldn't they just put all the components on the board and have a pass-through cable, just like with composite video? And Sega is the worst for this, because for something like the Master System, the RGB lines go directly from the encoder to the multi-out, so that requires you to put the resistors in the console end of the cable, and then capacitors in the SCART head, which is just bad practice altogether on Sega's part. But then you look at something like the MK2000, the Japanese Master System. All of the components are on the motherboard, and you just need a pass-through cable. So in a perfect world, all we would need is just pass-through cables with shielded ends, and it would solve all of our problems. But that's just not the case, and certain motherboard revisions, such as with the Saturn, output different sync, so you need different components in the cables. And the new cable manufacturers, the people that are selling today, continue to learn about the different board revisions and adapt their cables to them. And, yeah, it stinks that maybe you bought something a few years ago and the way they make it now is better. But, I mean, these aren't huge companies with unlimited access to funds. These are just, a few people that are testing as many consoles as they can by themselves. But there's just a ton of motherboard revisions for each console, and it's really hard to kind of keep up with what you need. I guess, in a perfect world, when you have to work with what you already have, you would pop open each console, use an oscilloscope, measure everything, and put a new output with shielded cable or something. But it's just, that's not what everybody's going to want to do. So you just have to kind of work around what you have. And it's just up to us as a community and them as cable manufacturers to work together to make sure that their cables are built correctly with all the right components in them. And anytime we find mistakes, to be diligent and update the designs immediately. It's not fair if I bought a cable today just to find out it's the wrong resistors or something, and then I have to buy another one. But we're kind of all in this together, and we're doing our best, so, it's just something we all have to deal with. Luckily, though, if your problem's just in the SCART end, then it's super, super easy, especially for things like one of the cable manufacturers wasn't putting the capacitors in, so just by adding that in by hand, it was super easy, and that made it compatible with other stuff. So I hope I didn't go on too long of a rant about that, but I should get one of the cable manufacturers on here to talk about this themselves soon. I'll reach out to both and see if they're interested, but I think everybody, especially those people that actually understand in-depth analog video signals, like Zach and Steve and all the guys that are way smarter than me, I think we'd all really like to hear their point of view and why they make cables a certain way. So I'll try to get both of them on at separate times to talk and see and get their opinion. Okay, up next I have an interview with a former Sony technician that specialized in BVM and PVM monitors. He used to do calibration and repair, and he has so much information and insight into these things. It was really, really awesome talking on the phone with him. And I didn't want to bug him too much because I probably could have stayed on the phone at least twice as long. But hopefully, after listening to the interview, if we all have questions, maybe I could just keep a list of all the questions and then have him back on a little while in the future. But I just really great source of info, and he has an eBay page where he sells a lot of pre-calibrated Sony BVM monitors and some of the accessories to go with them. So any of us that have been looking for a BVM for a long time that don't mind paying top dollar, this is the guy to buy it from, because you're going to get a perfectly calibrated monitor. And, it's going to be packed and shipped correctly. And, yeah, it's way more expensive than stumbling across one, used somewhere. But if you have the money to spend and you just want something that's great, this is definitely the person I would recommend buying through. So the link is in the description to his eBay store. And for anybody watching on YouTube, it's audio only. So sorry there's no exciting views for it. But I'm sure you guys will enjoy it anyway, and I'm really looking forward to having him back on again once I could think of a million other questions to ask. So here you go. Hope you guys enjoy it, and I'll see you next week. A former Sony tube TV technician and current eBay seller of pretty awesome BVM monitors. How you doing, Pat?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Thank you very, very much for doing this. There are so many people that email me questions all the time about Sony PVM and BVM monitors, and I'm glad to finally talk to somebody that really has a ton of experience with this.
Super.
Do you want to give just a little bit about your background and what you used to do for Sony?
Well, I was a Sony tech. I specialized just in the PVM and BVM series. Retired in 2001, so really it was before the super high def stuff. But I have tons of experience from the 5-inch, 8-inch, 14-inch, all the way to 32-inch CRT monitors. Yes.
Oh, that's awesome. So now you were the main focus, I guess, was the calibration of them, correct?
Well, also, yeah, general service and calibration, both. It's one job. One person does it all, yeah.
Because it's funny. It's not only am I having a really hard time finding anybody that works on CRTs at all, most of the people that still do CRT calibration refuse to do any hardware work on them as well. At least today.
I don't understand why. Because you have to do the hardware service before you can do the calibration.
That's what I would think, too. I mean, if you have a monitor that potentially has bad capacitors, then how could you possibly do a correct calibration on it? So
you can't. And every monitor that is out of calibration has some bad capacitors somewhere. Otherwise, you could calibrate it. And when you can't calibrate it, you got to service it first.
Interesting. So out of curiosity, how much would Sony normally charge for a service like that? Because I think a lot of people don't seem to realize, even the really high-end BVMs that you're spending a few thousand on now, those used to be $20,000, $30,000 back when they were brand new. So I was always curious how much the original calibrations used to cost.
It varied depending on the model number, but usually a minimum of $250 and an average of about $450.
Interesting. That's funny. That's more than I paid for a lot of the monitors I've owned in my life.
Absolutely. Well, some of those monitors, you said 20 or 30,000. Some went as high as 60,000 when they were loaded with all the modules.
Oh,
so
wow, really?
Some of them were expensive.
Oh, I didn't realize it went that high, actually.
Yes.
Do you remember which were the most expensive ones?
The BVM D32E1WUs and the BVM A32E1WUs.
Oh, wow. I think I actually have the E-series of that, so I'm pretty lucky to have stumbled across one.
Right, you sure are.
So the one question I get all the time is, what is the best monitor ever made? And the general consensus among the gaming guys is the 20-inch BVMs. Is that correct?
Well, personally, I don't think so. I think the two best monitors ever made were the D24 and the D32s. The A24 and A32 are equally as good because they use the same CRTs, but the A is probably a little better. But for the average person to find an A and a BKM68X, it's not possible. There just isn't any more BKM68Xs that allow you to use RGB or component. So I would say the best two is certainly the D32, followed up second by the D24, and thirdly by the D20.
Oh, interesting.
And then after would be the 20F1U.
So is that because they have 1,000 lines versus 900, 600, and lower?
Not truly. The advantage, I think, of the number one, the D32, that has the ability to calibrate itself perfectly. And when I say perfect, I mean that. That means the calibration can come out so that there's no errors anywhere on the screen. You can do it literally dot by dot. You can adjust the three guns. You can do that with the D32. You can almost do that with the D24. You can't quite do it with the D20, and you definitely can't do it exactly with the 20F1U. But overall, the 20F1U is by far the easiest to obtain. They tend starting to be expensive now. 2 years ago, I was selling them for $400 or $500, and now they're going for $1,000 to $1,500. But the reason the F20 is so popular is they made so many of them. It was the most popular monitor in the world for broadcast and professional use. There's a lot fewer made of all the other models. Starting after the 2000s, the D20 came into effect, and of course it's a little better than the 20F1U because it has the ability to do 480p and 480i, where the 20F1 does not. So there's pluses and minuses on all of them. The biggest minus on the D24 and the D32 is the unavailability of CRTs. And if you ever need a CRT for one of those, it's almost forget it. You just can't find them.
Oh, geez.
There are CRTs available for the D20 and the 20F1Us, however.
So the actual CRTs that were in the different 20 inches, so something like an A series, was the CRT used in that the same as the rest of them, or is that actually a different type?
No, the CRT is used in the A20F1U, the 20F1U, the PVM 20M4U. All those three use the same CRT.
Wow, that's I never actually knew that. So the advantage of the BVMs is actually the ability to have the higher calibration options. It's in the electronics and not the tube.
It's a combination of both, but there is more adjustments available on the better monitors. In other words, there's more fine adjustments available. Where you don't have it on like the M4, you have a very limited amount of adjustment. Even though it's the same CRT, there's not the electronics there. When you get all the way to the A series, then they have a buffer board in there, which gives you even more options for servicing and super accurate calibration.
Gotcha. So that's actually something that I myself have as a problem, as well as many emails, are people that were able to get an A-series BVM that have composite and S-video cards as well as the SDIs, but not the RGB component cards. And some of these, mine has less than 2,000 hours on it. So some of these are pretty mint condition, but there's no way to actually put that RGB signal in. And the availability of that board, the BKM68X, I saw in the past 2.5 years, I saw one pop up on eBay, and that's it. So I'm assuming that's pretty much gone forever, right?
Well, yeah, they made less than 500 of those boards worldwide. And I don't have the figures anymore because that all happened after I retired, actually. The A series came out after I was gone. But in talking with some other guys, I think they made less than 250 of them. So, finding them is a little tough. I've sold 2 in the last 3 years. And I was very fortunate to get them. It was really by accident. I happened to purchase a couple of A20s that had the BKM68Xs, which was super rare. I do have a fellow that has a couple of boards, and we're still negotiating price. He's up pretty crazy prices right now. I think the going price on a BKM68X is about $3,000.
Oh wow, that's insane.
Yes, I agree.
So
I had a guy in Brazil during the Olympics that offered me even more.
Oh wow. Jeez, that's crazy.
Yes.
So, is there any way around this at all for people that happen to stumble across an A series? Can you get a component to SDI converter that will accept 480i or 240p signals, or is there really just nothing you can do?
Well, I don't think there's much you can do. I made an attempt to one of your gamers that I had sold a couple of monitors to called with that exact same problem, and I went ahead and shipped him a couple of an adapter that converted RGB to SDI, and I even sent him a generator along with a Tektronix generator, and he was unable to get it to work, certainly on 240 and very badly on 480. So I'm not. Again, I'm not a gamer personally. I'm a technician, so I'm not into all the various games that are out there myself. I don't have access to that. But I don't think that there's an easy way to do it, to answer your question directly. You either buy the BKM68X or you forget it, or you yank out that picture tube of your A20 and save it for a good D20 or a 20F1U.
Yeah, I mean, I think in my situation 2,000 hours on a professional grade CRT is nothing. That's not even broken in. So,
oh no, that's a wonderful tube. Yes.
Yeah, so I might just leave mine in storage and hope to eventually stumble across a 68X, or if somebody comes up with something else. But for your average tube that has just a few, maybe 10, 20,000 hours on it, still pretty low, I guess. You would actually suggest maybe getting one of the other BVMs that's compatible and just swapping the tubes out?
Yeah, that's certainly an option. Everybody talks about how many hours should you run before you change a CRT, and the factory always said 30,000 hours. But again, that was for super accurate color calibration. And if you had a post house or an edit house or a colorizer guy, they needed absolutely perfect color. I'm not sure that's a factor in gaming. As long as the color is good enough to the eye for the average guy, I think the tube is certainly good through 60 or even 100,000 hours. Past that, I think you're really stretching it. But the other side of the coin on that is most of the monitors that you see, or certainly a lot of them that have 100,000 hours or 110,000 or 90 or whatever, a large number, they probably don't have the original CRT. Most TV stations and professional video guys that had these monitors ended up changing the CRTs, maybe a couple of 3 times even in some of the studios if they had a lot of money, provided it wasn't CBS, which, by the way, that stands for Can't Buy Sony. But the bottom line is you have to know, you have to look inside and look to see if that tube is really the original CRT. And unless you're kind of an expert at it, it's pretty hard to make that definition.
That's funny, because that's my next question to you was, how come I've seen some of these monitors that have 29,000 hours on them that look terrible, and some that have 100,000 that look great? And I guess it's because that was probably the original tube on the first one and a replacement tube on the one with 100,000.
that's a possibility. However, that one with less than 30,000 hours that had a bad picture, that may not be the tube. That very well could be module needing service. So that's kind of another thing to think about.
Gotcha. So, is there any extra tricks to finding where these monitors are? Now, obviously, your eBay store, when you sell yours, they're calibrated, and they come in pretty good condition, and you charge a very fair price for them. People that are into retro gaming that really understand what you're getting when you buy a pre-calibrated BVM would all agree. But there are some of us that still just like to find a bargain now and then. And for years, I used to just go around and find people that or find companies that I thought would have to any kind of RGB monitor, and just kind of say, hey, I use these for retro gaming. I'll come and pick them all up for free. You don't even have to pay to throw them out. And a couple of times I was able to go in and get a stack of PVM monitors for free because somebody was about to charge them to remove them. And unfortunately, all of the places that had those don't have them anymore. They're all gone. They're all been switched over to flat screens pretty much. So any other tricks? Do you know of any places that just have piles of these things?
No, I think the piles are pretty much a thing of the past. Although a few months back I was able to pick up a dozen F1Us, but that's kind of a rarity anymore. But that came from a television station that had them in storage. So I think the first thing, if it was me, and I'm in the Midwest or in the East Coast somewhere, I think I would do a couple of things. Number one, contact all of the junk men, the electronic junkers. Contact them and tell them you'll pay them X dollars for every 20-inch Sony in a metal case monitor they come across. You'll pay them X dollars, and give them your name and number, and they'll normally call you because they get usually $5 to $10 or maybe up to $30 depending on the state for junk for these things just by weight. So normally for $25 or $30 you can usually buy them. Walk in with cash and hand the guy the money. The other thing is, if you're really serious about it, then grab your Yellow Pages or your computer and look for any post-edit video house that's anywhere near you and contact those guys. Those guys have the monitors. Most of them have switched over to the OLEDs, but a lot of them don't. A lot of them still have those monitors, and that's where I get most of the monitors that I sell, other than a TV station. And the last thing is to contact the TV stations. Some of them still have them. They've got them stuck back somewhere in the warehouse, and they'd love to get a few bucks from them to go pick them up. So that's mine. I just have to go hunting. There's no gold mine anywhere. You just got to go scavenge.
Those are all amazing tips. Thanks so much. I actually, I just moved to Manhattan, and a half a block away from me is one of the CBS broadcasting studios. But
that was a joke. Can't buy Sony. That's ABC. When Sony bought ABC, the first thing everybody said, well, CBS, the guys there said, you can't buy Sony anymore because they're owned by, ABC. Anyway, that's a joke. So don't.
Awesome. Yeah, the biggest regret I have since starting this website is maybe about the same time it actually launched. I happened to stumble across somebody who was in a hospital in California, and the hospital was about to expand, maybe 10 years ago, was going to expand one wing, and they bought 40 PVM 20 M2U monitors, and they stuck them in storage, and then the project got canceled, and they were getting rid of them for $150 each, and then if you bought them in bulk and could pallet ship them, he would do it for $100 each. If I had known, I would have bought every one of them and just left it in somebody's garage, barn, whatever, and just kept them for a while, because that was those monitors, brand new now, still, they're up $1,000, more than that.
That's unusual that a hospital would have that, because normally they would buy the MDU model, which is hospital rated, because the standard M2 is not hospital rated.
You know what? It was the white one. You're right. It was the MDU.
Yes, it would have to be, because they can't be sparkable in an oxygen atmosphere. So they have a different plug, and there's several different circuits internally that are different from the standard one.
And there's actually much thicker shielding, and there's more grounding wires along the ground planes because of something called 60601 certification. That's my old company. We used to build computers for hospitals, which is why I know all that useless info.
Exactly, and they all none of the MDUs have 16.9 because everything out there was 4.3 for the medical equipment.
Mm-hmm. So for somebody that's that has one or two PVM or BVMs, and they're starting to game on them. There's somebody that actually invented something that you could put in your game system, and it outputs like a grid pattern, a color test pattern, and things like that. So you could do basic calibration. I guess your average layman could probably look up a YouTube video on how to calibrate and kind of just go along and do it as best as they can. Is there any beginner tips that you could give to somebody that's trying to go a little bit farther? And I know we're opening up a can of worms here because obviously, working on CRTs is very dangerous. It's not like popping open a computer. Is there a middle ground for people to mess around with, or is there really just expert only past a certain point?
No, I think number one, they are safe. That doesn't mean you want your kids to just stick their hands in there when everything's running, but I think the normal care, being around the monitor while it's in operation, is not a hazard. I mean, you really have to try to get shocked. It's not something that's going to happen by accident normally. As far as trying to calibrate them, there's a couple of things you really need to do before you even attempt it. Number one is to purchase the service manual for that model. They tend to be a little bit technical, but the key thing is they show you the location and the numbers of the adjustments that you would have to make to cure some of the major problems, like all of the adjustments, for instance, that are on the yoke that allow you to really calibrate it properly, which most guys don't even touch because they don't know what they do. And you have a service manual, you can go to there and it'll tell you what the TLV or the HVE does, or they're gonna let you know. But without that, I mean, I think trying to calibrate it is way beyond. Secondly, you must have a verified, good, calibrated source. I'm not sure that all of these discs out here, I think the discs are probably okay, but I'm not sure about the players. I don't know how well these players can actually output, whether they are in fact accurate. And that's the second thing. So finding an accurate generator is probably the key if you're trying to make your monitor exactly right.
So there is a Blu-ray player called the Oppo, I think it's the BDP93, and this was supposedly verified with an oscilloscope that it outputs in something called source direct mode, that's their name for it, that is 100% accurate to what's on the disc. So, and they will output 480i. So that would be, for anybody listening, if you happen to have one of those Oppo players, I would assume that would probably be the easiest thing to do, because I was told that that's what the studios were using to test their Blu-rays as well.
That's a possibility, although I'm pretty sure that they're using, most of the studios that I'm familiar with, they're using the $5,000 and $8,000 Tektronix generators, so which they have calibrated. So I don't know.
Right, but I mean, I'm just talking for somebody who might have something at home. Using that versus using a $20 DVD player you get at Walmart would be, way better of a chance of getting an accurate signal.
Of course, one of the things what you're talking about there is the ability to do color calibration, and that's what you would need a really good generator for. All the BVM series have a generator internally, which will generate a white screen, they'll generate a grayscale, and they'll generate a crosshatch, and they'll generate dots. And those are pretty accurate. They are as accurate as you could ask for, essentially. So using the internal generator to do your basic calibration is fine. If you're starting to talk about color calibration, then you need a BKM14L, which is the probe, if you want to accurately do color calibration.
Interesting. Okay, and that's another huge advantage of the BVM over the PVMs then.
Absolutely. Of course, you take a model like the 20L5, it has internal calibration too for color, which is pretty good.
Now, are those generally, what were those used for, the PVM 20L5s? Because I've seen them, most PVMs I've seen in medical use, security, things like that, and then BVMs for the broadcast and post-production studios. But what would a midway between monitor like that have been used for?
Well, PVM meant professional video monitor, whereas BVM is broadcast video monitor from Sony. And I would say that most of the people that, small companies, if you will, are single guys that a guy does weddings, or he does video films, or he does commercials, you know, a small type guy, small company. They like the 20L5s and the 14L5s because they're pretty accurate. The 20L5, again, uses the same CRT that a 20F1U uses. So, you know, you can yank that tube and slide it right in. It's a good 800-line tube, and the 20L5 is also a 800-line tube, or the 14L5 is an 800-line tube. So both of them can give you a really good picture.
Gotcha. So for somebody that didn't have the 20 grand to spend but wanted, you know, as close to it as possible, I think the 20L5s were about 5 or 6 grand when I looked it up online. I'm not sure if that's accurate or not, but still,
4,900 or something. You could buy a nice 20L5, no question, when they were new.
Yeah, so
you know,
a fraction
depends
of the
on
price,
the
but almost as good. So
because the HD module that flips into a 20L5 was a couple of grand, or 3 grand, I think, at the time.
Oh wow.
That's the HD SDI module. See,
right.
that's another advantage with the 20L5 because it will do HD with component or RGB input without any additional modules.
You know what? That was the one thing I really was curious to see when I got my 32-inch BVM is how would some of the HD sources look, and I was absolutely blown away at how good it looked. I mean, it was just you know, blew away any of the cheap LCDs out there nowadays. So,
yep, it does. Does a great job. My favorite monitor by far.
So everybody, it's I'll put a link in the description of the video for what your eBay channel is, or your eBay store is. And right now, I see you have a couple of monitors, and you also sell a capacitor replacement kit on there, correct?
Yes, these are for the guy that wants to take his 20F1U and make it new-like again.
Yeah, that is a huge help to people because, you know, I know just enough to be dangerous, but I'm not even close to being an expert. So for me to be able to discharge a monitor and replace the capacitors, it's totally within my skill level. But as silly as this might sound, figuring out which capacitors to buy was really intimidating. The first time I popped one apart and tried to find it, because you go on a site like DigiKey and, you know, you could spend hours trying to figure out exactly which capacitor is the right replacement, you know, and you have a lot of them to do. So having a kit that's all in one where you know exactly, you know what you're getting is just a huge super help to people. So I'm really glad you sell those. That's I'm sure after this airs, a bunch of people are going to go out and buy them. So.
Well, one of the big advantages, of course, is like you said, is trying to figure out which to buy. Number one, there's take a horizontal deflection board. There's probably 40 capacitors on that board, maybe more. But there's only less than 20 that have ever gone bad, depending on the circuit they were in. So the benefit of these little kits is that it gives you the location of the suspected part, let's call them. So that you can go right to it, unsolder it, and drop the new one in. Boom. It's over and done with. And if you don't have the ability to do that, you can always take your monitor to a normal TV-type repair guy, or take your modules, like in the F-Series. You just pull them right out and take them to a TV guy, and with the capacitors and the parts list that shows the values that I supply with it, and the professional tech can replace them, you know, post-haste, just boom, boom. So it is a big aid. It beats the heck out of having to go buy another module, and normally these TV guys don't charge you that much just to change capacitors.
Yeah, you know, it's a lot of the guys around the New York City area I've been calling because people, email me all the time. Hey, where can I get my monitor repaired? Where can I get a cap replacement done? And most of the places around New York City just flat out said we don't work on any CRTs anymore at all. So I imagine if we brought them the board, that's way easier to work on. They probably would. But it's funny because a lot of people are just flat out refusing to do any CRT work. Yeah,
I think the key, of course, is there's the two modules that in the 20F1U, which again the most popular one. The two modules as the deflection module and the video module, and those just unplug. You just pull them out. The video module's got 4 connectors that just undo, and the Deflection module's got one large connector that you unplug, and they slide right out, and you've got them in your hand, and you trot them right down to somebody, and they do the service. All the capacitors that I put in these kits and the parts that I use are all upgraded too. They're to the latest version, the latest production changes from Sony, so that you're really upgrading the monitor when you do that, because they've come upon parts that they've later discovered work better if the value was changed. So these include that. And all the capacitors they include, all are 105 degree centigrade capacitors. So they're the highest temperature that you can get available. So they're going to last even longer after that.
Geez, that's all great tips. That's awesome. I'm probably going to buy a kit as soon as we hang up.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. I'll put a link to your eBay store in the description, and I imagine you're probably going to get a bunch of stuff sold by the end of the day that this airs next Monday. So, yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
If you would, I think putting my email address is probably even better. And people can just email me direct. One of the problems through eBay is if people contact me through the store, they shut down any contact between people on other subjects. So if you want to take it down, I'm Patrick Gravier. That's PatrickGravier at netzero, netzero.net.
Okay, well, thanks very much. And yeah, I mean, I really appreciate all the info. This was just so great finally going to a source of info for this and getting good answers. So thank you for your time.
You're very welcome. I hope it helps somebody. That's always good.
Absolutely. Okay, take care, and I'll see everybody else next week.
Have a good holiday. Thank you.